While we're reading, my name is Allie, and I presented to you guys last week on my SCDM project. I'm a former LEND trainee. I have a dog named Obi. Can you guys introduce yourselves and say something about yourselves?
Sure.
Are you guys open to that? Sure. All right, Katie, since I talked to you, do you want to go first?
Sure. Let's see. I just told you I had to slowly put out. I'm Katie. I also have a dog. His name is Dusty. He's my fur baby. I like to dress him up. He doesn't mind. He's a little mini golden doodle.
Yeah, no, mine.
And what else? I'm getting married in October.
Oh, exciting! Where are you getting married?
Georgetown, Kentucky. So our friends own a restaurant down there. We're already, guess we're married. It's our wedding reception.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Let's go next.
Yeah, I'm Sarah. I'm speech pathology. I'm in grad school currently, my second year at ITC. I also have a dog. She's a golden retriever. Her name is Peaches. She's very large.
Peaches is an awesome name.
Yeah. And then I have a cat, and his name is Tyson, and they are best friends.
Oh, really?
And yeah, my cat tries to clean my dog's face and stuff. She puts up with it. Doesn't love it, but it's so sweet. Yeah. Yep.
Great. Maggie?
I'm Maggie. I'm also speech pathology. I'm in grad school for my second year, but I go to Miami. I personally don't have a dog, but I visit my family's dogs. They have 3. So my
We
mom.
don't have to all talk about dogs.
Okay.
Great. Yeah. I would say a lot of people love dogs. All right, you want to go next?
Hi, I'm probably here with graduates.
You have it because you just sent it to me yesterday. Can you send it to me?
Oh, awesome. Cool. Okay, great. Amy, can you go next?
Just like doing general.
Yeah, just say one thing about you.
My name is Amy. I'm a psych student at Miami.
Awesome.
I think we were actually in.
You look so familiar. Yes.
Where were you together?
At the OPAG's
Anti-racism subcommittee.
Oh,
Yeah.
cool.
I stopped coming because it was crazy. But I like dogs, but my heart lies with cats.
Oh,
great. So.
Oh my goodness, that's a lot of cats. What are their names?
Marshmallow, Snoopy, and
Great.
Do you want to use this or can I use it as a extra mic in the back?
Yeah, you can use it.
Okay, because if I'm going to present mostly from up here.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's my turn. Griffin Engel. I am the 4th-year audiology intern. So I'm still technically at Purdue, but don't have to go there.
Oh, that's cool.
Are we just giving info about dogs?
I don't know, just.
I'm an 8-month-old puppy. She's
Oh,
really new.
That's good info.
Did you say your puppy's name?
Her name's Minnie.
Oh.
She's a little Westie.
Will she always be mini? Yeah, because Westie's are small.
Yeah, she'll be like 14 pounds tops.
Great.
Should I go?
Bailey?
Yeah, I can go. I'm Bailey and I'm in the genetic counseling program at University of Cincinnati. And one thing about me, I will stray from the dogs.
Okay.
But
I love it, new theme.
I know this past weekend I actually went kayaking with some people from my cohort in genetic counseling. That was really fun.
That's awesome.
So good.
Where'd you guys go?
We went on the Little Miami.
Perfect.
Yeah, it was really fun.
Well, I've been wanting to do that before summer ends. Now we're running out of time. All right, and I can't see your name tag.
I'm Caitlin. I'm the physical therapy resident here, and I have triplet brothers.
Triplet brothers?
Cool.
Whoa, fun fact.
Love that.
You, oh, this is not the chat box.
Do
Do you want to leave the chat box on?
Are we doing fun facts?
I just went up. You know what?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I'm Nellie. I'm also in the genetic counseling program at University of Cincinnati. And my fun fact will be that I did tap dance for 16 years.
Whoa.
That's awesome.
I love that.
Hey, I'm Michelle. I'm a family specialist. I don't have any dogs currently. I have 2 children. One's 20 and one is 14. And the fun fact is I kind of did backup in karaoke over the weekend.
Oh,
There's like 2 other people at the place besides my group of friends. But it was really funny and I got one compliment with that. I wish I can actually do this.
What songs did you do?
The one I got a compliment on was Dreams by Fleetwood Mac.
Awesome.
Nice.
I'm Jody. I'm my specialty here is adult services. I do have a dog named Lainey. I do have 3 children and a husband. In that order.
So they have them on hand.
Okay.
I'm Sam. I'm the OT fellow. I have 2 dogs and a cat.
Cool. My gosh, there's just so many pet people.
Hi, I'm Suma. I'm one of the developmental behavioral pediatrics fellows. And I have 2 dogs, a beagle and a yellow lab.
Oh, that's awesome.
Fun.
Hey, I'm Greg Miller. My discipline is advocacy, and on top of being diagnosed with autism when I was 2, not only have I have been playing guitar and doing ventriloquism, something I'd like to add is that I also like to do impressions.
Okay, what's your best
Yeah, who's your
impression?
best?
You have to do one for sure. Sorry.
Sorry, I'm putting you on the spot.
Okay.
Oh, hi everyone! It's me, Mickey Mouse.
That was awesome.
Good job, Greg.
So Greg.
I have no
impressions
idea.
On top of ventriloquism. That's awesome.
Yep.
I love it. We are recording, correct? Can you see guys from the, yeah, we're recording, right? Kavya, give me a thumbs up if it says recording. Okay, cool. Thank you. Well, welcome to Leadership Tuesday.
I'll meet everyone. I think there are only 2 people I didn't get to meet, so I'll meet you guys during the break and then.
Oh, great. Perfect. So, no. Where are you going? You gotta, gotcha. Don't go far. Don't go far. Actually, we probably should leave it in the back. Because what we're finding, Allie, is that the back people are harder for the folks in Zoom land to hear. So if we can use, we'll leave it with Michelle. It's fine. Right there. Much as she loves having that there. So yeah, you guys, on the Lend Light schedule, it said Kimberly Rotundo was going to be here presenting with me, but you are lucky enough to get Allie Fisher twice with me this week. Yay! So Allie, I think we've mentioned her a couple times during Lend previous, but she is a Lend graduate of our program from 2 years ago. And she has thankfully stuck around with us to help us with a lot of our DEI curriculum. You met her last week. She will be leading an SCBM project, and she just kind of all around does a lot of fun things for us to help us out. So one of them being today's presentation, and then she'll be back again on Thursday as she and I talk about the evidence-based cycle and kind of what we're looking forward to with the research component of Lend. So that being said, today we're going to talk about presentation skills, and then with whatever time we have, we're going to do a writing little activity. So how do you start? Does that sound good? And let's make sure the slides move. Yay! Oh, the tech is working again this week.
And you're going to do this to who, when?
In my part.
Okay, perfect. All right, so yeah, we will be presenting on presentation skills. So if you have any feedback about how we're presenting, we definitely are open to that and want that because this is a topic that's very important and we can all improve on it. I know I'm not the perfect presenter, but it's definitely something that I'm very passionate about and excited about. So we are going to get things started with some questions for you guys to reflect on, to get you guys thinking about presentations. So I want you guys to think about a time you went to an amazing lecture and what you took away from that lecture. And whoever wants to start us off, but I will give you guys time. Yeah, go ahead. Caitlin. Okay, perfect.
So this past year, I went to it's called CSM. It's like the biggest physical therapy conference you can have. And there was a lecture called like the gamification of sports or something like that. And the lecturer had us go through like balance activities, squats, things like that actively, so it was fun, and just taught us different ways to make like the typical like boring things like single leg balance, things like that into a game to help with like participation with kids. And I mean, I use a lot of their techniques now, so I just kind of learned how to implement that stuff into what I'm doing with kids. So it was just really fun and didn't really feel almost like a lecture. It was more just like group activity, even though it was technically a just 2-hour lecture that went by. So
That's
I thought that was
awesome.
great.
Yeah, so it sounds like for the start, it was a lecture that you wanted to go to and was something that was interesting to you and something that was really relevant to what you do on a daily basis. So we started off with that, like to start with, it's something that you're invested in. And then on top of that, they had you actively participate in the, components that they were teaching you, making it so much easier to remember and to use in your daily practice. So that's really awesome. That was a perfect example. Does anyone have any other examples that come to their mind? Lisa, go ahead.
I will kind of do like the opposite of what Caitlin said is I attended like a workshop type thing and they weren't even lecturing, like there really wasn't learning. It was as if they were just like talking down to us. So there wasn't any interactive components. There wasn't any discussion. It felt like there was that power imbalance rather than a learning atmosphere.
Yeah, so first of all, and I'm guessing you're telling us about a time you had a terrible lecture. Yes. So there was, first of all, like that culture of like power differential and like, you not feeling like you're on the same playing field as them and them talking down to you. And how did that make you feel?
I was not tuned in at all.
It made you tune out and disengage. And that's definitely something that happens when we're feeling uncomfortable or when we're feeling talked down to. We're not going to remember what happened in the lecture. And then you also said that there weren't any interactive components. So they only gave you one way to learn the material, and that was them just talking to you. And so that's another way that, you weren't really able to access and really retain the information that was presented to you because they were only giving it to you in one way. So that's a really good example of a terrible lecture and something that we hope to never copy or do. And then for our third example, I want you guys to think about a time that a lecture wasn't accessible to you. And so even in Lisa's example, it sounds like that lecture wasn't very accessible because there weren't multiple ways that they were providing you with information. But you can also think about a time there was too much information on the slides. They weren't presenting in a volume that you could hear,
You couldn't see the slide materials. The room wasn't set up in a way for you guys to really understand and take in information. So whenever anyone is ready, tell us about a time that a lecture was not super accessible and made it really hard to learn. Amy, go ahead.
Yeah, so I was actually in a training yesterday, and they were providing a lot of information and just actually going through it way too quickly, and I like could not keep up.
Yeah, so they weren't presenting it in an accessible way because they weren't presenting it in a pace that anyone could take time to process and take in information. And so that was really not accessible. And did you say the material was kind of complicated? It was too much material. So, there's a finite amount of information that our brains can take in one setting. And so when we're not thinking about that, then we're not going to be giving accessible presentations that people can really take in and retain information. And so I loved all of the examples because we're going to really get into all of those today about how we're going to think about all of those examples and how we're going to all become the best presenters ever. All right, so our objectives today are to identify key points for an effective presentation. We're going to talk about how we're going to engage different audience types. So how we're going to think about our audience and how we present the material differently or in different ways, depending on who we're presenting it to. And we're also going to identify ways to increase accessibility and inclusivity in presentations so that all different kinds of audience types are going to be able to take things away and understand our presentations. So we're going to think critically about presentations, about our audience. We're going to learn communication styles and strategies to use in presentations. And
Sorry, so you have accessibility. Let's move that out of the way of the words.
thank you.
I did want to see if there was a way to show people. No, I don't think there's going to be. Okay, sorry, go ahead.
And we are going to be learning about how to teach and mentor today. So those are our MCH competencies. So today we are going to go over the basics of presentation. So things like thinking about who we're presenting to, what our topic is. Then we're going to think about what our audience needs and how we want our audience, like how they're going to get information out of our presentation. Then we're going to do a little bit of discussion about different technologies we can use to increase engagement, inclusivity, and accessibility in presentations. And then we're going to focus really specifically on action items to make our presentations more accessible. And then we're going to do a super fun activity.
Followed by a super fun writing activity.
It's all going to be fun.
So, okay, so we kind of broke it up this way because we all have probably heard a presentation or given a presentation recently for many of you. But some of the things that we just need to cover are, you have to know what your topic is, right? You have to know specifically what are you, I'm just gonna do this for right this second. What are you trying to cover? And you have to focus in and be very specific because let's say, for instance, Maria was asked to give a talk on autism and it was 1 hour. Right? Like that's way too broad of a topic. Greg's like, there's no way you can talk on autism in 1 hour, right? You have to be very specific. Are we going to talk about the diagnostic process in an hour? Are you going to talk about adults with autistic adults? Like what is the specific focus? And I just like this little Venn diagram. So it's at the top, topics you know, overlaid with topics you care about, overlaid with topics your audience cares about. And in the middle is where you really want to focus because you want to meet folks where they're at, especially adult learners. And we'll talk about that more in a minute. There we go. So once you have your topic, then your next step is always, what are your learning objectives? And you always want to not just list what you're going to talk about, but what do you want that learner to take away? So I always use the statement, at the end of this presentation, the participant will be able to. fill in the blank with an action word. And I know this is a hard slide to read, but if you just Google Bloom's taxonomy, you're going to see really cool images like this and like this. And they're all filled with these really powerful action words. And those are the words you want to use to build your learning objectives. So actually, our CME office will not take understanding as a word that is approved, but that's just kind of the idea of up the chain of higher order thinking. The main basic that you can get people to do if you're just lecturing at them and telling them something is to remember what you said. Then as we go up, you have them kind of apply, interpret, match it to their real world experience. And then further apply it to a skill, right? So knowledge, skills, and attitudes are some of the things that we oftentimes try to change with our learning objectives. And then all the way up at that top, the creating, evaluating, and analyzing, those are things that oftentimes you're going to be doing either as a clinician in clinic. That's going to be your hands-on activity of learning and teaching with your people you mentor, with the people that you supervise. That's going to be the higher level order of actually carrying out tasks based on your disciplines training. So again, I just really like this light bulb. It gives you a lot more of the verbs that you can use, and definitely never start a presentation without knowing your topic and then listing out your learning objectives. My rule of thumb is 2 to 3 learning objectives for every 1 hour of training. Sometimes even just a 2-hour talk, having 3 learning objectives is perfectly fine, right? So I think today we had 3 for this one and 1 for our writing. Perfectly fine. So just be thinking through what you're going to cover and don't go overboard. Like no 2-hour talk needs 10 learning objectives. That's way too, speaking of what Amy said, that's way too much, right? And then be mindful, if you're going to do 30% lecture, one of your 3 learning objectives would then be knowledge. If you're going to do a hands-on activity, you'd want to have one of your 3 be an application objective, and so forth. So once you've got your learning objectives, your next idea, well, probably as you're working on your learning objectives, you're paying attention to how long you have. So do you have 60 minutes? And really, does that then turn into 50 minutes because you need to give people a break? Do you have 3 hours? Do you have 6 hours? Are you in 15-minute increments because you're on the fly in clinic? And what time of day are you giving your presentations? So my favorite was always when we were in person and we'd go over to base at lunchtime. And I'm sure Maria and Suma can share with us, what does it look like at lunchtime on an academic medical center campus? The residents are going to get their food, and then they're going to listen to a lecture. They're scarfing their food, they're finishing their notes, and then they're sleeping, without a doubt. Like, and maybe that's changed since, I don't know, since COVID, but I doubt it. But like literally, you have to be paying attention to your audience. And have they had enough coffee? Are they ready in the morning? Right? Is it not lunchtime? And how do you keep your objectives short, sweet, to the point? Because you're competing with their hunger, their biological needs, and the fact that they've just worked all morning and they're about to go work all afternoon, right? So it's those kinds of things you got to be paying attention to. A lot of times for families, I find when we teach in the evening or at night, they're like, let's bypass a break because I want to get home to my kids. And I'm like, okay, that's good to know. But had I not known that and not asked them ahead of time and had that experience, I would have given them a break, and then they would be like, okay, let's go. Let's chomp in at the bit. We got to get going. So be mindful of the time that you have allotted and also the time of day. You also want to be mindful of the location and the environment. As you've heard us like praise this technology this year that's finally working for us, we have pretty great technology. I can tell you, Jen and I have presented in some very interesting places. One time, including like a 1,000-person church where we were up on the pulpit. And I was like, oh man, what is this? No projector really, no sound. And it was literally like we were the pastor at the church. I was like, this is so different. So I kind of put up some images because you really have to be mindful and think through what your audience is going to be looking like when they're looking at you. How are you going to walk around? Is that going to still project sound? How are the tables and chairs set up? And Ali will talk a little bit more about some of those things with the accessibility, but you always want to think through those things beforehand. Never do a presentation without checking your tech. Always check your tech. whether it's making sure Zoom is accessible, whether it's making sure your YouTube videos are tried out and the sound is working, having your microphones. Like, this is why I'm all up in arms about like this lapel mic. Like, we need to get a real mic in here. They were supposed to bring it last week, so I'll be calling them later. But we want to check our tech to make sure it's accessible for everyone, but also that everyone has a fair opportunity of learning from each other, because adults want to learn from each other, not just from the audience member or from the presenter, I mean. This is just an example of the way to organize. You always want to organize your slides so that people can follow along with you. So for example, this was our agenda slide, because we're going to break everything down into these subsections. And then you'll know, oh, the needs assessment is next, because I made a different color placeholder slide for that next section. Because don't we all love a progress bar, right? Domino's is like thinking they're so cool because they created a progress tracker. And I'm like, honestly, they are. I would rather order from Domino's knowing when it's going to be delivered to my house than order from Donato's knowing that it's never going to be delivered to my house. And if you live in Clifton, you know what I'm talking about. But I feel like whenever I take a survey, this is again, like research, teaching, anything, you want to let people know how far you're going. And this kind of agenda slide, and then the way in which that you organize your slides can help them know, okay, we're getting towards the end. Or, oh, technology, we know we're halfway through, right? Especially since you have these slides in front of you via Canvas. So if you give slides ahead of time, then people can follow along. So I really love that feature. Questions on basics before we move into needs assessments. I know I ran through that in like 5 minutes, but they are the basics. Okay, so needs assessment. Know your audience. What I loved was that Allie, before we got started, was getting to know you, right? She was getting to know your likes, dislikes. She stole my thunder because I was going to come in like playing music and like giving you, something, talk about that. So she did it for me. It was great. I was like, oh, like we kind of got to know each other a little bit before we started. We also know you guys because we had the opportunity to survey you before you even got here. That was one of your summer activities, right? What is your research experience? What are your learning styles? What's your favorite leadership quote? Like, all of those things were for a purpose so that we could get to know your needs and your likes and dislikes. And so, sorry, did somebody say something? No? Okay, cool. Feel free to speak up. And you also, Kavya, Maddie out there, I think Julie hopefully was able to join us too. Speak up and just interrupt, no worries. But you want to know who your learners are, right? Are your learners parents of children with disabilities? Are your learners parents of children that are in high school? Are your learners other professionals, but from different disciplines than your own, right? You want to know who they are, what information do they bring? So what do they already know? And what are the gaps in their knowledge? Why did they show up to your talk? Or why were they forced to come to your talk in some cases? How do they prefer to learn? And how will you assess that what you taught them is what you intended to teach them and that they took that away? So we listed these out just because this is one of those slides where it's like, okay, check, 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 check. Do I know all these things? Or have I set myself up in a way that I can get at least some information on each of these questions at the outset? Whether that's creating a registration link, collecting some of these pieces of information. That's always very helpful. Instead of just saying, okay, tell us you're coming. How old are your children? Or what is your professional background? Any of those pieces of information you can collect beforehand and already have prepared is fantastic. I always, oftentimes too, when I go meet with a new audience, what do you hope to get from today's training? And just go around the room saying one quick thing. And that always is a really nice way of double checking, like, did I prepare these things that are what they want? Or, okay, how do I gear my examples to make sure I'm meeting their needs? And that also helps you get a little bit of assessment on their gaps in knowledge too, because if I'm going in and I'm talking about the basics of autism and they're like, I want to know the diagnostic criteria, I'm probably not going to go in and teach autism like I would teach it to somebody who finished the LEND program, right? I'm going to have to pull it way back to the basics of Autism 101. And then how they prefer to learn. I always set up just like we did at orientation, like don't hesitate to feel free to stand up, walk around, ask questions, interrupt, Sometimes you might not have time for that. You might have to save questions till the end. And for some learners, that does not work well. And for other learners, it works really well because somebody else's idea doesn't interrupt their time to process. It's a toss-up. So always ask your audience. And we'll talk a little bit more about assessment too. So this is just one strategy that they use in K-12 education all the time. But I think that we can use it with adults too. So just really having this idea of at the outset of a talk, having your audience write down one thing that they know about that topic. So one thing they know about Down syndrome. What is one thing you want to know about Down syndrome? And then at the end of the lesson, report back, what did you learn from this session? And that also gives you another double check of, okay, they did take away, or you're like, wow, I did not recall saying that, but I'm so thankful that that's what they took away. That kind of thing. So KWL can be a really nice strategy to assess, but also then assess on the front end and assess on the back end, I should say. Be multimodal. So as you guys saw when you did your pre-LEND survey, we wanted to know, how do you prefer to learn? And I would say that the literature on this is mixed, but the literature is also, I guess the literature is mixed on how effective, if you have a visual lesson created, how effective that is on the visual learners learning of that topic. However, all of the education literature says, be multimodal, give people a variety of ways to learn and a variety of different opportunities to apply information. So, any ideas what these adult learning assumptions, what these images might be? What about the Rubik's Cube? What's a Rubik's Cube signify? What do you as adults like to do? Did you come to do this? What? Puzzles, right? Solve problems, right? So adults like to solve problems. That's one, right? Adults, I have this image there of the glasses. You all bring your own focus. You all bring your own history and experience. So that's what that is, right? The way in which that you see the world is unique and important, and that should be shared with others. And so, there's a whole wide, broader world and many other perspectives, but we're valuing what you bring to the table, right? We also have this kind of own compass and clock, and you'll hear Jen say that a bunch of times throughout the year for True North, like follow your compass, not your clock. But your compass is your own identity and your own self-concept, and you bring that to the table as an adult learner as well. And so what's interesting to me is that you take on a topic because you like it and you think you know something about it. Then the more you dig into it, you're like, wow, I didn't know what I didn't know. And that's what's powerful about adult learning, is that you build on that self-concept and that conceptualization of that topic over time, and build and build and build until you reach what is considered expertise. The other pieces that I think are important are you follow an internal kind of, you got this, is more of an internal versus an external. I don't know. I still love to be told I did a good job. So just saying, I sometimes, and I've talked about this with Katie too, because we're like going to be in school forever, probably. I don't know. I put up the white flag and I was like, I can no longer do organized school after my MPH. But this idea of like, at some point, getting an A in a class is no longer the goal. Mastering a task, seeing a patient, or giving a talk, or writing a paper, those become the grades that you used to get in school, right? Those are the intrinsic or internal motivators. And then finally, the guy on the start line, you have a readiness to learn, right? You all are at a time in your lives that you came here because you wanted to take on this task. Same thing with if you ever go, like Amy, sounds like you went to a talk yesterday on, what was the topic?
Well, it was a required training for my lab.
Okay, so nonetheless, you had to be ready to learn all that information because you're going to soon apply it in your lab, right? So we don't just, I don't know, you wouldn't go to something that has no bearing on your life What?
Lend. You all joined.
You all joined Lend, right? Because you were ready to take on these new topics and next steps. You wouldn't just go and like, I don't know, necessarily learn about ice cream if you didn't want to like eat ice cream, right? Or you didn't want to like make ice cream at your house. Like I didn't just take a charcuterie board class if I'm not gonna like enjoy my cheese and meats. So, right, that's how adults learn because they want to apply it. The other thing that we have to pay attention to with adult learning is the why. And the greatest example for me is always, we'll get an email that comes out from the institution and I'm like, why are we making that change? For example, I still need to follow up on this. The institution, since I've been here, has always had a phone policy where you dial 9 to get out. We get an email last week. Nope, next week we're gonna start dialing 8. There was not a rationale for it anywhere in this communication. And I'm like, now I'm just mad that they didn't tell me why, right? Now I'm just, yeah.
When they sent out to us, they had an explanation.
See, thank you.
Because we're in psych and they're like, they're gonna wanna know.
Yeah, we all want to know. We're all adults. We want to know. We want to be in the know, right? Like, what is the reason?
Oh gosh. Well, I only read like part of it, but it's some kind of legislative thing about a person and 9 goes to something else.
Okay. So there's a reason for it, but I did not get that message. And I want that message as an adult, right? What is the why? Brandy.
Just gonna say, if someone's accidentally called 911 twice.
I was wondering.
Okay. See, the lens is different. For me, I'm like, yet another change. And Brandy's like, well, I'm just here and I made 2 quick mistakes. So I'm gonna go ahead and be excited about this change, right? But the why is always important. And you have to help people find that sometimes. You have to help illustrate that for them in your conversation, in kind of even in the outset of your talks sometimes. Like, this is the rationale. This is why this information is going to be helpful to you in your future. Or sometimes we might say to you here in Lend, this may not apply directly right now, but that's okay. We want you to remember that you were exposed to it so you can come back later, check out Canvas, check out that slide deck, read that book, whatever, and apply it later when it might be more salient for you. So Simon Sinek is a pretty famous leadership guru. So if you ever, his one book is Start With Why, and he does a lot of consulting for tech and in the business sector, all about how do we make sure that people understand their motivation, because no adult is going to do anything without understanding that rationale for doing it. So this quote, if we all take some responsibility to start with why and inspire others to do the same, then together we can change the world. So I like that one. But also, your motivation is one of your first assignments coming up here that you'll have to prepare in September and then do in October is your disciplinary presentation. So that's why we're doing this talk early, so that you have all this information and you can apply it as you're developing your own presentations. So what do we know? I'm a millennial, and we're honestly over the last few years have not heard as much millennial bashing as I once heard, because now that's shifted, unfortunately, to Gen Z bashing. So you will hear a lot of that. And I'm always like, leave us alone. We didn't give ourselves trophies growing up. The boomers did that for us, right? But nonetheless, Gen Z, there's a lot of research around the fact that right around now, there are 5 generations in the workplace. And this Gen Z generation is going to be the greatest shift the workplace has ever seen, because many of you who are a part of this generation never grew up without technology, right? I did have a time in my life where I was like, I was like creating AOL OA messages in college. Like Jen, I'm gonna call you out, Jen. Jen didn't even have instant messenger in college. She didn't even have email. Like, how did you even survive in the Stone Age? I'm just kidding, Jen. I'm just kidding. Humor. I know, right? Jody's like, what? No. Kidding. Totally humor. Right. But you had computer labs, you had all those other things, right? And so the shift is now we have managers who never had some of these technological experiences managing these younger learners, these younger employees. And that is causing a lot of tension in the workplace. Or better yet, the Gen Z, the millennial, the Gen X folks are becoming managers of people who don't have this technological experience. So obviously tech has played a huge difference in the workplace. And so what we know about Gen Z learners is that they are very much want it in their palm of their hand, not necessarily even a laptop. Like they want to learn on their phones on the go. And so there's tons of great material out there for downloading research articles and being able to have that at the palm of your fingertips. Gen Z also wants things game-based. So how do we make it to kind of be interactive and be able to talk to each other in real time? They also want it fast. So you see the cheetah there, very, very fast. And Gen Z also, which I think is really interesting because I kind of feel this way too. And I feel like a lot of other kinesthetic learners this would be salient for you, is that you want to see it done first before you're just told to go ahead and jump in. And I'm kind of like, well, yeah, that's good critical thinking. You want to know what to do. Whereas for a lot of previous generations, it was, I don't want to show you the example because I want you to use your creativity. I can't remember how many times I was told that in elementary school. I don't want to show you the example. I want you to come up with the example on your own and you just go with it. And I'm like, well, I want to do it right. Right. And so there's just that kind of mentality and that shift in the workplace that Gen Z, or the younger the learners, the earlier the learners are, that in that area, they want to see an example. So as you do your presentations in the community, as you do your presentations here, and as you see us do, we're always going to assess every single time, right? That's why we have you do the surveys after every single time we get together, because every person who gives a presentation, we need that feedback because we need to make it better. So aside from what you've seen so far in Lend, what are some other ways you've seen instructors, professors, teachers throughout your life assess your learning? Go ahead. Oh, so a test, right? Exactly. Many a test. And those tests assess different things, right? Sometimes they assess your actual fact-based learning, like through multiple choice. Sometimes they assess the way that you apply a topic through the way you describe it through written word, right? What else? Yeah, Lisa.
I remember in college, I had some instructors that had like checkout papers where you had to kind of like a mini test, but you had to write what you learned basically. Or there was a writing prompt.
So a writing prompt, again, more writing. Yep.
And some of them even ask questions.
Yeah. So yeah, just asking kind of open-ended questions at the end, like, what do you take away from today? Yeah, as it kind of your checkout of that session. Yeah, Maggie.
We kind of did this last week, but having you write down what you know at the beginning and then go back to it at the end, or give it back to you at the end of a unit or something to see how it's changed.
Absolutely, yeah, and see how things change over time if you have that ongoing relationship with somebody, right? So the other thing about assessment, and thank you all for chiming in. The other thing about assessment is that when you go to do your disciplinary presentations, and you'll see that the same questions for that are used for our weekly summaries or our weekly surveys. I mean, you are more than welcome to take that, modify that, use that for any time you do a presentation, now, this year, or in the future. Use whatever that's on Canvas and modify it to make it your own, but use something, right? Always assess something. Any questions about needs assessment and knowing your learners? I should say, what questions do you have? Sorry, that's another presentation. Not any questions, because people can answer yes or no, right? What questions do you have? Or better yet, tell me one question, audience. And then we all sit here please God, somebody speak up. I'll let you off the hook because we have a lot to accomplish. Technology. This one slide kind of says it all. Technology is so beneficial, but it really does take some learning, some time on the front end, and definitely preparation, because something goes wrong. Something always goes wrong, and you have to fix it and have a backup to your backup plan. But technology allows us to be more accessible. Anybody who's used the newest version of PowerPoint knows that there's an accessibility checker, and there's design ideas, and there's ways that you can make your presentations just more ADA compliant ultimately. Technology allows us to have things that are consistent. So I can record myself giving a lecture and thousands of people can hear that same exact information versus having to come to my in-person talk and I only get 10 people in that talk. And then the next time, the next 10 people may not hear it the exact same way, right? So there's that benefit of technology. Obviously, we're gonna be able to be more interactive. We can have more flexibility. Oftentimes with technology and the ways in which that we can build in questions throughout that maybe are more reflective of what we've learned over time. But we don't have to change the whole content. We just change how we assess it, or, so we can be quickly adaptable. We can get real-time feedback, which is fantastic, and kind of consistency and reusable. I mean, oh my gosh, it's so nice once you start giving presentations to just recycle. So again, very quick on technology because Ali is going to cover some tech stuff in the accessibility piece. Questions so far? All right. Speaking of technology, we are going to use them. So if you could pull out a tablet, a smartphone, your computer, and join the link www.kahoot, KAHOOT.it, or if you've used this before, you may have the app downloaded. And once you get there, you'll want to go, I know it's a little small to see, so I put this little arrow there. There should be an enter pin at the bottom where you have a 4-colored square. So it's a red, blue, yellow, or orangish and green square. And once you are there, sorry guys. Just give me 1 second to reshare my screen. So, got it. We're gonna do classic mode. And so once you're at kahoot.it, you will enter the game pin 68086. And let me share this on. You can go down this right. No, I'm not. Hold on. So again, the game pin is 68086. And let me do a new share for our friends in Zoom and did not do it correctly. Now it lets you add a fun name. Feel free to add your own name. Feel free to add someone else's name. Feel free to add Dr. Smith. Feel free to whoever you want to be today. You do not have to be yourself. It's the fun part about Kahoot. The other thing is that what I like about Kahoot is that I will let you know it's timed. And it can be fun. It can also be very anxiety provoking, and some professors will not use it, will not at all, because it's anxiety provoking. And I just want to point that out. If you do not want to participate, you just sit here and watch, and that is A-okay with me. Or you can just turn off your brain for a minute. I'm just giving you an example of a way that you can do game-based technology that literally took me 5 minutes to build this. And again, as you can see, there's a little bit of time. But they keep making updates to Kahoot, which is great because even if you didn't go to the website, you could just scan that QR code on your screen and get there that way. So Kahoot is just an easy, quick way. I'm going to go ahead and say that lots of people have joined. So we have 20, and that's okay. If you have not joined yet, you can join at any time. You just may miss some points because, like I said, it's timed. So we are going to start. And this is based on just information you learned about me last week. Try to keep it easy and fun. Start with a puzzle. So what is my name? And the choices are, the red is Dr. Steph, the blue is Mrs. Smith, the orange is Dr. Bubbles, and the green is Dr. Toys. I've been called Dr. Toys a number of times. But. And so as you see, also, it's set to time.
It didn't.
Mine had got it
We're
wrong.
supposed to drag them in.
Oh. All right, well, we all lost. That's okay. I think you know my name, so it's cool. All of you got it wrong. What do I teach? Red is math, blue is Lend, yellow is science, green is ELA.
Oh, what do you do?
Shoot.
What do your teacher teaches? Just hit.
Oh, I clicked the wrong answer.
Great. Blue, Lend. Awesome. Oh, and then Sarah did it the quickest and Maggie wasn't far behind. So that's why they got the most points. So now I know, oh, you guys taught me that I need to fix my first question. Where do I come from? Oh yeah, y'all were listening. So close and attentive. I wish I was from Hawaii. Yep. Awesome, awesome. Hamilton. Oh, Maggie's edging Sarah out. Oh, but Griffin and Nellie are bringing it. They have the arrows over there. They're making jumps.
I know.
Which pet do I have? I don't know if I mentioned this, so just take a guess. Red dog, blue bunny, orange cat, green frog. Yeah, definitely a dog. And only will I ever own my own dogs. I do not like other pets of any kind. Maggie's still in the lead. Oh, Kavya coming in hot from Zoom land. And what hobby do I have? Red painting, blue running, orange watching theater, green playing music. I don't know if I mentioned this either. Yay! Okay, maybe I did. Clearly, some of you heard that, or you just guessed right because you know I'm not a runner. All right, okay. I think this is, oh no, 2 more questions. So again, we have the progress bar, 6 of 8. What's a fun fact? I have tried skydiving, played the banjo, have 5 siblings, have a son named Easton. All right, yep. Fun fact. Lisa, bringing it. Edging out Maggie. And, oh, this is a multi-select. Oh, are you excited to start this Lend year? Yes, absolutely, not really, or I wish I still had vacation. So obviously the correct answers are red and blue, right? But you can also. Awesome, awesome. And finally, last, what do you hope to learn? I love that gift. How to give an effective presentation, how to make a sandwich, how to use Zoom, or what the heck are we talking about? Very good. Very good. So, who ended up on the podium? Maggie in 3rd. Lisa, silver medal, and dun, 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 dun. Randy coming in at the end. Woohoo! Awesome. And Bailey and Sarah not far behind. So thank you all for engaging in that easy and quick example of using technology.
Can you change the time on Zoom?
You can. So I made them very fast. Actually, I think I forgot to change one, so it was still 30 seconds. But it can go down to 10, I think is the lowest, all the way up to a couple minutes. So you can imagine how, and that's what I like about Kahoot though, from the accessibility perspective, is that you have those shapes and colors so that you get to tap into some different ways of looking at the question and answer choices. There's so many templates as well on Kahoot. That's really cool. I own Kahoot. So if you want to use Kahoot, I'll actually kind of let you guys know some websites of the ones that Lend owns, so that if you want to log in and use them for your disciplinary presentations or at any time throughout the Lend year, you're more than welcome to. Again, technology is always a learning curve. So it takes some extra time on the front end. If you're used to PowerPoint, great, and you're short on time, use PowerPoint. If you have extra time and you want to learn something new, try something new. There's so many out there, and it's really kind of fun when you get to use new things. Like you saw last week, Kara using Canva for her slides. Her slides look great, right? Because Canva is so nice. Oh, hold on. I should have shared screen first. This. Okay. Oh man, I'm over on time already. I know I am. Okay. So we did our technology. Another strategy is the rule of 18. You never want to lecture more than 18 minutes. And this is for a traditional audience of, I would say, not Gen Z, honestly. So the older your audience, the closer to 18 minutes you can get. The younger your audience, the closer to like 2 minutes you should be, honestly. Like there's been some research that like younger people want to take in information in like literally 30 seconds. And so if a video on TikTok is longer than 30, I don't even know if videos on TikTok can be longer than 30 seconds. That's my problem. But like long videos, they're not even going to attempt them. Or that's why sometimes like if you're reading on an online newspaper, they'll tell you like, oh, estimated time 3 minutes. For some people, they'll see that 3 minutes and they're like, I'm not gonna read it, right? I'm one of them sometimes. Like I don't have the time sometimes to do those things. But giving me the idea of how long it's gonna take me, cool, that's great. But you never, ever, ever want to lecture more than 18 minutes in a row without having some sort of audience engagement. So even just since we've started, so I've been lecturing since about quarter after, I've asked you guys a couple questions. We've had the game, right? So I've tried to break it up, but never more than 18 minutes. So always remember that. Also, we know that emotions and learning are impacted in the way you process memories. I remember in college, and I was thinking about this as we were putting these slides together, I will never forget an example in college where I was in my criminal justice like basics class, and there was a research study being done, and somebody came in and stole a backpack from the back of the room, and we all were like, oh, and we all had to then like try to tell the security officer what we saw in the thief, and none of us got it right because our emotions were on edge. We were in extreme fear. We were like, what happened? Somebody just came in and stole a backpack out of this room. Like, oh my gosh, turns out it was a research project, right? It was all about like recall bias. And I was like, oh my gosh, but I will never forget that class. I have no idea what I learned in that class that day because all I remember is that instance, right? So it's hard to remember when we have extreme emotions like fear, surprise, anger. Like today, like Johnny and Michelle are probably gonna be like, Dr. Steph, like only talked about generations. Like that's what they're gonna take away, right? No, hopefully they take away some humor as well. But it's easy to remember things when we're emotionally invested, when we're calm and relaxed. So that's one of the things that Jen and I always talk about in Lend is that y'all may have gone through a grad program, y'all may be going through a grad program or a med school program or wherever, where it's like, every time I walked into a classroom, I was stressed. How are you gonna learn, right? We want you to walk through that door back there, feeling comfortable and open and just knowing that you can, this is your safe space, right? That's how we know you're gonna learn best. That's what the research has said for eons. Using humor. So again, we use humor a lot. It increases your focus and attention, it improves your recall, and it creates just a positive climate. Don't need to say much more about that. Another strategy that you'll see us use throughout the year is a think, pair, share, which is you kind of get an opportunity to think about something on your own. So it builds your own opportunity for creativity and problem solving. Then you pair off with 1 or 2 other people. Then you're able to share back out to the group. So that is a very common practice that you're going to see anywhere, conferences, talks, whatever, but it gives people that opportunity to do individual and then comparison and then teaching each other. Then we have bridging, which is just basically connecting to what you already know and finding a way to make it match something that already is happening in your life. So analogies, which I think, as Ali will say, depends on your audience. Sometimes analogies are no good because they're not going to necessarily apply it and pick up on those kind of things. But moving on, hugging is just making it more likely that you're going to transfer what we wanted you to do into the future. So next semester, you're going to get an opportunity for a simulation where you will be actually sitting across the table from an actor and being able to simulate what it would be like to share diagnoses with the family or have difficult conversations with the family. So those kinds of simulation games are meant to heighten your anxiety just enough that you're still in a learning zone, but not outside of your comfort zone, right? A mental practice is just thinking through, okay, how might I apply this in this situation? And how can I think through that and practice that over and over again? So, and then the contingency learning is more of just, okay, what do I need to have on hand to solve this problem? And then show of hands, again, the humor, could land or could not land. Who's seen Office Space? All right, so as it turns out, my little meme here is not going to land with more than half of you, because if you haven't seen Office Space, this probably doesn't make sense. So again, know your audience. Next year, Allie, note to self, change this meme. But the meme says, if you could provide evidence from a reputable source, that would be great. And this character in that movie would say, if you could come and work on Saturday, that would be great. And he says it throughout the whole movie, and it's kind of a thing. But again, build credibility by citing evidence in your slides. So some people do that by just the very small bottom citations. Some people save all their references for the end. We've done them throughout today, so you know exactly what's information came from what slide. So on that note, it took us too long. We'll do our writing assignment another day. We're going to bag the writing assignment today. We're going to take 5 minutes and then come back, and Allie will lead us through the second half of the presentation. Sound good? Cool. Thank you, guys. Feel free to use this time to ask questions or whatnot, but take your break. Yeah. Yeah. Before she's stuck in that anxiety provoking situation without prior knowledge. That makes sense. So I feel like everybody's discipline has something like that. Like Griffin is probably working hard on like, how do I reinforce kids for participating in my hearing games, right? In the booth games, right? Those are things that you're not going to just learn necessarily on the fly. You're going to get taught ahead of time. You're going to see ahead of time so that you can apply that skill later on. Does that make sense? Good question. You up?
Yeah.
Cool.
All right, so I wanted to start off by asking, what does accessibility mean to you guys? What do you think of when you think about accessibility?
Easy to get to, easy to use.
Yep, so anyone could get to wherever they need to go, and anyone could use whatever it is that you're having people use. Great. Lisa?
It allows everyone to participate and engage with the material.
Yeah, so not just a select group of people can participate and engage with the material, everyone can. So different learning styles, different experiences, different age groups, people with who are deaf and hard of hearing, so everyone can participate. Those are all really great examples. So I'm going to go over pretty like specific ways to make our presentations more accessible. While I'm doing this, if you see something or hear something that I do that is not accessible, you can feel free to call me out on it. I am by the way no expert in this area. It's just something that I have an interest in and that I'm passionate about. So the next thing we are going to do is a horrible anxiety-provoking example of an inaccessible slide. So I'm going to give you guys a short presentation on a rare childhood disease. I want you, as best as you can, to remember as many details as possible, because then I'm going to quiz you on it. So I'm going to intentionally cause you guys anxiety to demonstrate a very inaccessible slide.
I'm just gonna try to get that set up professional audio thing out of the way. Did you see that? Is there an X?
Oh.
You gotta go over there.
Am I over there?
Keep going.
Ooh.
So, oh, yeah, click on it and then the X shows up. Oh, other side.
All right. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and remember as many details as you can. So I'm gonna be talking about Moyamoya disease. Moyamoya is a rare progressive cerebrovascular disorder caused by blocked arteries at the base of the brain in an area called the basal ganglia. The name of Moyamoya means puff of smoke in Japanese and describes the look of the tangle of tiny vessels formed to compensate for the blockage. The disease primarily affects children, but can also occur in adults. In children, the first symptom of Moyamoya disease is often stroke or transient ischemic attack, commonly referred to as mini strokes, accompanied by muscular weakness or paralysis affecting one side of the body. Reduced blood flow in the major vessels of the interior circulation of the brain leads to compensatory development of collateral vasculature by small vessels near the apex of the carotid on the cortical surface, leptomeninges and branches of the external carotid artery supplying the dura and the base of the skull. Other symptoms may include headaches, seizures, disturbed consciousness, involuntary movements, vision problems, cognitive and or sensory impairment. All right, guys, what causes Moyamoya?
Blockage of the blood vessel at the basal line.
Wow, nice job. You guys are too good at this. All right, what area of the brain does Moyamoya originate from? Yep. What does TIA stand for? You guys are too good at this. All right, name 5 symptoms of Moyamoya.
Headache.
Dizziness. Sensory cognitive.
All right, well, you guys did not help me prove my point. You guys did too good of a job. Okay, but how did it feel when I was reading the slide? Katie?
I was not listening. I spaced out. I mean, I heard you saying words that are on the bottom. I'm like, I told myself, I'm like, I'm not even paying attention.
All right, what else? Maggie?
Distracted that you always looking at the screen.
Yes, I was looking at the screen the whole time because I was trying to read off the slides and get all of this information across that probably should have been parsed out in like 10 slides. And so that was very distracting, Greg.
Yeah, I also saw that a lot of the information that was on there, none of it was highlighted and all of it was just like really looked like it was jammed in there. When I saw it, I was like, what on earth?
Exactly.
What is
Yeah.
this?
So the interesting thing about this particular font is the space between each of the letters on this font is really small, which makes the words look even more jumbled together. And the space from the first line to the next line, etc., is really, really small, which again makes the lines jumble together. And this is particularly challenging for individuals with vision impairments, individuals with dyslexia. All of those things make this slide all the more challenging to read. What else did you guys think about as I was reading the slide? Yeah, go ahead.
Instead of paying attention to, you end up reading the slide.
Yes.
More on that.
That is
Doing the same things. I
know it's gonna be quiz.
exactly. So you guys, so we can really like only do one thing at a time. So like you in that position had to decide, am I going to read the slide or am I going to listen to Allie's monotone voice? And you guys chose some of you chose to read the slide, but you couldn't do both at the same time, which is why it's really important for slides to be short, have limited text on them, so that you can really engage with the speaker, who's the one that's knowledgeable about the information. It's not the slides that are presenting, it's the person that's presenting. And so to be able to pay attention to them, it's important to have really concise slides. Does anything else jump out at you about this slide that is inaccessible or less accessible? Elizabeth, go ahead.
I didn't know what a lot of the words were.
Yes, exactly. So if I was presenting about this disease to you guys, I would not expect you to know, maybe you guys, progressive cerebrovascular disorder, what the basal ganglia is. Like, I wouldn't expect you guys to know that. So I would need to think about the language I'm using to present in a way that you guys can understand and take in information. Excellent. I'm trying to think, you guys covered a lot of the things I was thinking about. Anything else?
There was no pictures in the.
Yep, no pictures. So it's really awesome, and I'm going to talk about this later, to pair words with pictures because that's a multimodal way to help people learn and connect the material to each other. Suma, are you going to say something? Oh, perfect. And then the other thing I'm thinking about right now is that I didn't tell you guys ahead of time, and this is just one slide, but I didn't tell you ahead of time what I wanted you to get out of this slide. So you had no idea what my quiz questions were going to be, which doesn't prepare you to try to take in the information in a thoughtful way or really pay attention to what I'm trying to help you guys get out of this. So you guys did an awesome job of thinking through why that was the worst 5-minute presentation ever. All right, so I'm going to start with some just kind of basic general tips about creating accessible presentations. So Steph already mentioned this, but you want to make sure you provide the information ahead of time. Why might that be helpful? Suma.
Some people may want to like look at it and then like ask questions during the lecture.
Yep, so it allows people to look at it as you're presenting so that they can ask questions. If they have it, they can go back to the previous slide to help them ask questions, and they can follow along in a way that makes sense for the audience. We want to, just like I said, avoid reading slides word for word because we can only do one thing at a time. I know we all like grew up hearing and learning about multitasking, but multitasking isn't real. You're just doing two things at similar times, but really poorly. Another thing that I didn't do was I didn't spell out TIA, but you guys remembered what it meant. I'm mad about it, but you guys did an excellent job. So you want to spell out acronyms so that people know what you're talking about and what you're saying. So for example, like if you're speaking to an audience that knows very little about autism, you probably want to spell out autism each time rather than doing something like ASD. If you're speaking to a LEND audience, that might be okay. So it's all about knowing your audience, but in general, you want to try to avoid acronyms because our brain is taking the time to think about what the acronym is, and that's taking away from our ability to listen to the lecturer. You want to avoid complex jargon like cerebrovascular disorder. I don't even know if I would know what that is. Just like Steph said, you want to provide multiple ways to learn, whether that's pairing pictures, whether that's interactive asking questions, whether that's like Caitlin's presentation that was very hands-on. And then just kind of a rule of thumb is you want to try to do at least 24-point font size so that to give learners the best opportunity to be able to read the words on your slides. I've seen a couple of people that say at least 18, but I try to stay upwards of 24. If I'm really desperate, I might go down to 23, but I try my best to do 24-point font size or greater. And now we're going to spend some time talking a little bit about different types of accessibility. And so this is going to be a little bit more focused on different types of audiences. So the first thing we're going to think of is auditory accessibility. And so when we're thinking about this, we're going to think of people who are deaf or hard of hearing, people who just have different difficulties hearing in general. Maybe they have difficulty hearing low frequency sounds, or maybe they have different difficulty hearing high frequency sounds. So what do you guys think are some ways to increase accessibility auditory accessibility. Griffin?
Closed captions,
Yep.
sign language.
Yep.
Making sure your microphone is on and close to your mouth.
Yes, yes. I was listening to someone talk about this online and, you know, there's always that moment when maybe our tech isn't working and you have the opportunity to either use a microphone and like, you know, deal with like having to fix it or fix the technological difficulties, or you have the option to just say, oh, I'll just project my voice. And you should always choose to use a microphone because that's going to be the most accessible choice that gives everyone the most opportunity to be able to hear you. And so Griffin, you also mentioned captions and sign language interpreters. So a couple of considerations with those are when you have sign language interpreters, you want to make sure you give them the presentation ahead of time so that they can think through, you know, how they want to present certain slides or certain words. And you also want to make sure you're pausing because there's going to be a delay between what you say and the interpretation, whether that's sign language interpretation, a different language interpretation, or whether that's captions. So you want to make sure you give that delay so that people are able to pair what you're saying with the slides and have that time for that interpretation. And the last thing I have on here is always face the audience. This is less relevant with masks on, but you know, when we weren't wearing masks or anytime that we won't be wearing masks in the future, it's really helpful to face the audience so that they can see your lips and what they're saying. And that makes it a lot easier to be able to pick up on what we're saying, especially if two words sound really similar. Sometimes those lip cues can be really helpful. Is there anything you guys think I'm missing here? I mean, there's, you know, tons of different things you could do. Those are definitely like the most important, but is there anything that you guys think of that I don't have on here?
Yeah, I think this is kind of similar to what Griffin said with like microphones and what you said as well, but like where the locations of the speakers are.
Yes.
Not like the speaker, like the speakers.
Yes.
For people that might be harder to hear.
Yeah, definitely. So you want to like, just like Steph was like, we need a mic in the back. So you want speakers at different locations. So again, everyone has an opportunity to be able to hear the speaker. All right, so now we're going to talk about visual accessibility. So we're thinking about people with who are blind, who are colorblind, who have visual impairments, who have difficulty seeing, maybe difficulty with non-contrasting colors or with small font sizes. So what do you guys think are some important things to think about with visual accessibility?
The image description.
Yes, image descriptions. PowerPoint makes that pretty easy where if you just click on an image, it says alt text and you can edit that to include an image description so that screen readers can go ahead and, you know, say what the image is. And that's really helpful because images really are adding to the slides. So you want everyone to be able to access those images and what they say and what they mean. What else do we think about?
Color contrast, because some of the audience may have color blindness, so we have to make sure that the color doesn't affect the.
Yep, so we want to make sure that the colors contrast each other. And one thing that you can do is you can actually print your slides in grayscale, and that will be give you a good indication of how well your colors contrast for audiences who are colorblind, of how they'll see it. And then similarly with that, we want to avoid red, green, and pink because those are colors that are particularly challenging for people who are colorblind. And then we also want, again, to have a copy of the slides available. That's just a general principle, but that can be particularly helpful in this situation for visual accessibility. Anything else that you guys think about? Yes, Amy.
I just have a question.
Yes.
Do you have tips or like somewhere you can direct us for like how to give good quality like alt text or image descriptions? Because I've never used the feature because I just don't know what to write.
Yes, that is an excellent question. And I have seen a number of websites that really go over how to write image descriptions. And I've looked at one of them somewhat recently, but I don't want to tell you now because I'm not going to do as good of a job as someone who does this for a living. So I'll upload on Canvas a place where you guys can go for a description of how to write image descriptions. Lisa, will you write that down for me so I don't forget? Otherwise, I'm going to forget that I said that. All right. Anything else or what other questions do you guys have? That was an excellent question. All right, so now we want to think about cognitive and learning accessibility. So we are thinking about intellectual disabilities, learning disabilities. We are thinking about different ages and stages of development. So how we're presenting to children versus adolescents. So what do you guys think are some important considerations to make our presentations more accessible?
I'd say add pictures, shorten the length of your description and make it in plain and simple language.
Yes, amazing. Those are all excellent tips. We keep our text short, we keep our language plain and simple. And so again, this is a lot about knowing your audience. So you want to know, who your audience is, what they know, what they don't know, and what kind of like learning or cognitive disabilities that they might have that might impact their ability to take in the information that you are, to access the information that you're presenting. Anything else you guys think of that comes to mind? Lisa?
To like check the reading level
Yes.
of your slides.
Yes. So that is really, really important to check the reading level of your slides. You can actually save your slides as a Word document, and then you can copy and paste it into any online Word reading level, and that will give you a general sense of what reading level your text is at. And so you want to really think about what reading level your audience is going to understand and match that. Something I actually recently learned is for individuals with dyslexia, you want to avoid underlining and italicizing words because that makes them kind of like look like they're going together even more. And so that makes that less accessible and readable. We've already mentioned keep lines short. You also want to avoid white backgrounds because it can be a little bit glaring and make it harder to read the words on the slide. So as you can see, like all of our slides are in this sort of like soft gray background. And so that's something to consider, especially when they're projected bigger, that can make the white even more glaring. You want to have larger line spacing. So just like with the Moya slides, how the space in between the lines, the words or the letters. The space in between the letters were small and the space between each of the lines were small. You want to pick a font that has larger line spacing for both of those areas.
Is there any specific like recommendation? Because you can change it. Like there's 1.5 or 2.
Yeah, I recently saw that like if you do 1.5 in between lines, that can be really helpful. But I haven't seen recommendations for between letter spacing. And then does anyone know the difference between a sans serif and a serif font?
Serif has like the feet.
Yes. So this is a sans serif. So I guess the little foot must be the serif. And so you want to use fonts that are sans serif, like this one. Oh, Can you not see my mouse?
Oh, no.
Okay, well. Like this one and not like this one. I should probably put an X there to make that easier to digest and understand. Because it's easier to read sans serif without the foot font. And the pointing also reminded me that when you are presenting, you want to think about if you're using things like laser pointers or directing people to various parts in your slide, you want to make sure that everyone is going to be able to access that. So someone, who is blind wouldn't be able to see that I, ran over here and pointed to this. And people with visual impairments aren't going to be able to see a laser pointer very well. So it's important to think about how you're going to make something like this, like clearly I didn't do the best job of making this visually accessible. So that would be something good to think through. All right, language accessibility. So here I'm mostly thinking about people who speak a different language than English, people for whom English isn't their first language, maybe they're learning English. So what do you guys think are important considerations here?
Like having a language interpreter for that language for whatever the person speaks.
Mm-hmm. Yep, so we want to have a language interpreter. And again, we want that delay. We want to consider the delay between when you speak it and when it's interpreted. What else?
Just the rate at which you're actually speaking, don't speak too quickly.
Mm-hmm. You want to speak slowly and clearly.
Not using expressions that might be very from your culture, like that happens to me all the time. And it's like, what? Like, I don't understand. What do you mean?
Yeah, the one phrases that are specific to your culture, like idioms. The one I use like most often that I just always correct myself on is like, instead of saying no, thank you, I'll say I'm okay. But like that doesn't really convey that my answer is no. It just conveys that I'm doing okay. And so that's when I think about all the time that I use really often. And that is used very often. So you want to think about your language that you're using. Gestures can be really helpful. Again, it's kind of like with pictures, you're pairing your words with something else to help the learner, take in the information. Pairing with pictures. And then, just like you said, we want to avoid idioms and then use language interpretation whenever that's relevant to a presentation. Okay, so now we want to think about how we're going to set up the room to make the presentation accessible for people to get to. It's one of the first things that was said by Michelle when what is accessibility? People need to get there. So what are we thinking here? Lisa?
I first think of like physical accessibility, like ramps and types of doors and elevators and things like that.
Yeah, so when you are presenting, one thing you can do is just step outside the building and go up to wherever you're presenting and think about how would someone in a wheelchair, someone with crutches, how would they get into this building and get into this room?
I think the same could be said for like aisles and like table height, like being wide enough for a chair or mobility aids and like the right height.
Yep. So I came into this room and I saw like these aisles are definitely not big enough here. So that's an excellent example. We also wanted there to be an accessible restroom nearby. Like, I feel like, when we get out of a 2-hour presentation, we all need to use the restroom. And so I feel like that's really important. We also need to make sure that screens are able to be seen from all angles. Oh, you can see my, oh, you can only see my notes here, all right. Large aisles. And then we also need to think about, well, if someone is using a mobility aid or a wheelchair, where are they going to sit and how are they going to get to that seat? So that's kind of similar with the aisles. And are we going to have a designated area? Because like, for example, like where would a person with a wheelchair sit in this room? There's not really like a good area for a wheelchair with the way this room is set up. And then how are people going to be able to see the like sign language interpreters or other language interpreters? So where are we going to sit individuals who might need sign language interpreters or other language interpreters? All right. Before we move on to our group activity, what questions do you guys have?
Is there anything against using like bold or highlighting in presentations?
I haven't read anything about bold or highlighting being a problem. And using different colors is also fine as long as they're contrasting. Anything else? All right, so what I want you guys to do is I want you guys to go onto Canvas. Oh, I can just pull it off on my computer. So under activity, you should see mock lecture PowerPoint. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to divide you guys into groups. So, all right, see, I'm not good at numbers. Let's do you guys know how many of there are you guys? How many are you guys? Okay. So we will have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 together. So you guys are going to be group 1. So one person in your group download the presentation and one of you guys download the document, and that's going to give you guys instructions. We'll do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then we'll go 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then we'll have you guys and the people on Zoom. So I didn't think through, I didn't know we had Zoom people. So is there a way that like we won't all be able to hear the Zoom people?
We've been transferring them to the laptop, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so, oh, okay. But I'll explain to you guys what we're gonna be doing. I just wanted to have you guys know who your groups are. So what we're gonna be doing is you guys are all going to pull up a PowerPoint. The PowerPoint goes over a little bit of information on an IEP, individualized education plan, and a 504 plan. So it's got a little bit of information on that, and each group is going to have a different audience that you're presenting to. So one of the groups is presenting to, gosh, I made this so long ago, I don't even know if I know. I think one group is presenting to a group of family members of a child with autism. Another group is presenting to people who are going to become family navigators who will help families with autism navigate these things. And so each of you guys is going to have a different audience, and you guys are going to have some prompts to think through of, how might you change the slide content? How might you think about how you're going to set up the room so the room is accessible? Who might you invite to the presentation, whether that's sign language interpreters, language interpreters, someone else who might be an expert in the field to help get the point across. So you guys are gonna have some objectives. You guys are gonna have a description of who the audience is. And then you guys are gonna think through some prompts about how you would change these lecture slides. You don't actually have to change the lecture slides, but instead we're just gonna think through it and talk through it. So make sure that one person in your group is going to be the note taker. So that you guys can present out how you're going to change your slides to be more accessible and inclusive and tailored to the objectives of the audience. So Steph, I need help.
Got it.
Can you even see that?
Yes, I can see that. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So our group is a diverse group of caregivers of children with developmental disabilities. Just fine. A diverse group of caregivers of children with developmental disabilities. Some caregivers have children who are recently diagnosed with autism, and other caregivers have children who were diagnosed greater than 5 years ago. And the purpose is to support caregivers in advocating for school-based services for their children.
Okay.
So, have to strike a balance with that. That font is way too small.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I'm like.
I cannot see a thing.
The white background. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, also, something about like eligible child, like
That's not great.
what that would mean.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, love it. You guys are coming out like this.
Oh, I can hear you.
Yeah,
sorry.
sorry.
No, no, you're fine.
Forgot about that part.
Me too. Okay.
So font size.
Random bullet.
Yeah, it's not a random bullet. What is eligibility? Also, it does not talk about the fact that an IEP is actually only geared towards the needs of a child in terms of their education. It's not just tailored to your child's specific needs. Like if your child needs potty training, that's not necessarily like,
Yeah.
it's about how like for me, like speech or language, like how that affects their ability to interact with the classroom. That's what it's about. I think like it could be a lot more specific about how it's tailored to the child.
Yeah.
So. Because it doesn't mention that this is like a school-based document.
No, it just jumps right in.
Yeah.
Also, that eligible child with a disability should get an IEP. It's just like, how does that even, it's just, there's nothing there. Can you say, do they say how to do it?
Right.
Is
And
it
then
probably
feel
just said
like,
how
is
to
there a
do it?
chance where they don't?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
like you have to find out if they qualify.
Also, like, it doesn't talk about who is involved in the IEP process. And about how parents actually are involved in that. And there's like 4 people that are supposed to be involved in it. It's like a general ed teacher, a special ed teacher, an administrator, and then I think like oftentimes there's an SLP or an OT involved, but it's supposed to involve like a lot of the teachers and the parent, that's what I'm forgetting. Parent. Like they're required to be at the meetings for the IEPs and stuff.
That color,
it's
Yeah.
dark green.
Also, this might just be me being an idiot, but it's a developmental delay 3 to 5 years. Does that mean like?
Yeah, what does that mean?
Yeah,
What age?
like-
Is that how delayed they
That,
are?
yes, okay.
I feel like most of this is general and I don't know how to apply it to our particular group. A group is diverse caregivers. So some of them are like have a newly diagnosed child and some of them have a child that was diagnosed a while ago.
Yeah. Well, I think it's just kind of you have to cater to the lowest common denominator, right?
Yeah, so I feel like there should be more like
What is
age
autism?
based.
Yeah, like,
Yeah.
and like definition of like what all these things are,
like, what is
like what is other health impairment?
Mhm.
And those sorts of things, like what would qualify as that?
I think also like if it's just skipping to a 504, like what does an IEP provide?
Yeah,
Yeah,
also like if all these parents, like if they all have autism, like no offense, but what is the point of this? Like, I don't know.
I think this.
It just says developmental disabilities, but then it does say autism.
Oh, I thought
Yeah.
it was specifically autism.
It's
My
unclear.
bad.
Honestly, it's unclear.
It's a trick.
My bad.
If it is just autism, then I feel like you could at least focus on autism and include the other ones.
Yeah. Are we ready to?
Definitely.
504, children are eligible for a 50, well, also this font again. If they have a mental or physical impairment that learning
What does that mean?
substantial
What does
limits
that-
learning or
Example.
another
Yeah.
life action.
Yeah, I don't like that.
I don't like that either. I'm not gonna lie, I'm like unclear about if I'm a full
We use it a lot like in medical. It's like can be absent or like requires water bottles at all times, or like has to lay down every little bit of stuff, or like has to have remote ones available when. So it's more like someone explained it like IEP is how someone is like how someone is a child and like what they learn. And then a 504 is the environment in which they learn.
That makes sense.
So I was like,
No.
Yeah. Yeah, provide examples.
And this long list isn't good, like, can you like break it down into like the list instead of
Yeah.
just like listing everything?
Mhm.
Yeah, accommodations may include physical safety devices, wheelchair, yeah.
And also like if
So
we're
much.
talking to people that are like new to this diagnosis, like I feel like also some information on like what is the likelihood that children do receive these services and what do you have to do? with them? Yeah.
Also,
well, and
like,
probably what you just said, what's the difference between an IEP and a 504?
yeah, and like, why don't we hear it more? Like, if we're talking about autism, which I don't even know who you are.
That would be
Mhm.
It would
clarifying.
be nice if we talked about.
It's also really depersonalized for giving it to people that you know are.
Also, no
Yeah.
pictures.
Right.
Pictures. Oh my god. I actually like this slide a little bit more.
It's a bit better.
Ask for an evaluation. What?
How?
Ask who?
Ask who? Ask when?
Yeah.
Your
In what
question,
manner?
right?
What kind of
Who?
evaluation?
Who, what, where, and why? Yeah, what kind of eval? You should make your request in writing.
Also how? In a letter?
Specific information about your child's needs. Okay.
What?
The font's small. Yeah.
Also, they have one picture and it's all equal.
Oh,
So no diversity.
diversity in their life. Who wants to share out? You can open my notes.
Wait, now we have to say, how might we set up the room you're presenting in?
Oh,
Oh.
Facing the screen.
for sure. Make sure that there are accessible ways to get in the building and in the room.
Yeah, like wheelchair accessibility. Bathrooms nearby.
Who might you invite to present with you? Maybe an education.
I was gonna say like a special ed teacher.
And even like an experienced caregiver that could also like speak to their experience.
Or like a school-based SLP or a school-based OT or a school-based psychologist, like, but someone that works in the schools, I feel like. would be
Yeah.
really beneficial.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. School-based research. How would you change the content of the class? We would redo it.
We wrote down many things.
We would redo it. How would you change the visual aspect? What visual?
Right.
Yeah. Get done on time.
Who wants to present now? Patty?
Okay. All right.
She laughed.
Group one.
I mean, I can't, I just couldn't really hear some of what you guys were saying. So I got a little bit of it, but
Top two things would change about the slide. Oh. So point of the microphone.
Wait, when she- okay, hold on, what's the Zoom? I'm so afraid.
How we can do it for four.
thank you.
I'm not on Zoom, they're on the other line.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry. Do you want us to record? Oh, it is recording. Yay. Okay.
Just heard us talk the whole time.
Here we go.
All right, go ahead.
All right, so we were group one, and we are training a group of Latinx caregivers of children with developmental disabilities, and they've been hired to become navigators. And in this content also told us that for some of the family navigators, English is not their first language, and they speak Spanish rather than English. And just the overall purpose is to teach the future family navigators how to talk to other families about how to make that reports. The big thing that we were talking about is the language accessibility. So we kind of brainstormed a few things with using in-person interpreters, just to make sure those families have a point person to talk to if they're confused about anything, but also just consulting with an interpreting organization to see if some of these families need an interpreter. Then it's kind of hard to do a presentation in English and in Spanish. So just talking with them about like maybe using interpreters that will like interpret in real time, and that goes like to earpiece or like a microphone or something for those families. Like just let us do that because we weren't sure, you know, what the best food is for that. And then I thought Caitlin had a really good idea about making sure that since we're talking about families and this can be just like a vulnerable topic for people, that maybe instead of doing like rows, that we do like a circle so that the families are like facing each other with the presentation in the middle, just like this little bit more.
Yeah, I love that. I love that you also love that you thought about the comfort level of the families. And then I love that you thought about, well, maybe if there's a question that we can't answer about language, let's consult an expert and see what they think and how they think we can make this presentation most accessible. I think that's brilliant. You guys did an excellent job. All right. You guys want to pass the mic to group two?
So we have a group of undergrad students with hearing and visual impairments who don't have a lot of background on developmental disabilities. We talked about a lot of things with like the slides themselves and like how they look, about like colors, adding different visuals, having sign language interpreters. With the content of the slides, that's what we were discussing at the end. A lot of it was just like very detailed, didn't give any like background info, didn't define terms over and over again. We talked about like having like compare contrast slide. Yeah, there's a lot of different things we talked about.
Yeah, that's awesome. You guys really covered a lot of ground of how can we really tailor this presentation to an audience, not only like, you know, their hearing and language status, but also thinking about their background knowledge and what they do or don't know about an IEP in 504. I like that you talked about a contrasting slide of really helping students understand the differences between them. So I think you guys covered a lot of really great points. All right, pass the mic.
Do you want us or them first?
Go ahead. Mike, go ahead.
Anyone? No.
Sorry.
Yeah, so we had, ours was presenting to a diverse group of caregivers of children with developmental disabilities. Some had children who were diagnosed recently and others were diagnosed like greater than 5 years ago. So it was to support them in advocating for school-based services. So we centered a lot around content because it didn't meet the objective at all. Like it talks about like what does an eligible child mean and what's the difference in an IEP and a 504, and if you have to do it in writing, who do you do it in writing to?
Yeah.
And what the next steps are. And we also thought it was pretty depersonalized for it being to a group of caregivers. But yeah, it just didn't cover like who was involved. There was no examples related to the types of disorders or what type of in-person writing you needed to do. And then for a diverse group, we also noticed that there was only one picture in the entire presentation, and it was in all white people. So yeah.
Yeah, you guys caught basically everything I was thinking about when I wrote that one. When I wrote that one up, yeah, we always need to think about representation. That's actually something that we should have presented on in this presentation, but we also want to think about representation on our slides. So who is our audience and are they represented on the images and the slides that we're showing? Because it can be a really isolating image when you're seeing a bunch of slides of people who look nothing like you and have really different backgrounds than you. So I love that you guys brought that up. And again, I love that you guys talked about the emotional piece of like this really depersonalized language. All right, last but not least. Take the mic. All right,
I'm just
so
in a group
we
of
were
entirely introverts.
Orders, hoping to give them a brief overview of school-based services and remind them of terms used by the school system and get feedback from them about their experiences with school-based services. So we talked about a lot of things, but some of the highlights I think that I haven't heard covered in other groups and specific to our prompt was in terms of who we would invite to present with us, people from the school as well as adults who have lived experience going through school with some kind of developmental disorder. And then like another group said, setting up the room kind of more like in a room or a circle to facilitate like comfort and giving feedback. And then about the slides specifically, one thing that I don't think has been mentioned yet, is just reorganizing them. So like the order makes a little more sense, and then things are like fonts and contrast and visuals.
Yeah, it was really painful to create these slides because they're so horrible. But yeah, you guys, I love that you brought up who you would present with, because that's a really good thing to think about. Like when you're presenting to family members or self-advocates, like, are you, bringing people along? Are you having people present who are going to understand the experiences of your audience members and where they're coming from and what their needs are? And so again, like representation can be really important there. And yeah, I love that you guys talked about reordering the slides and really just thinking about all of the aspects of the slides that are visually inaccessible, like the font size, the colors, the contrasting. So you guys all did a fabulous job. And feel free to, my email's not on this one, but my email will be on the slides on Thursday. So feel free to email me with any questions or concerns or just say hi. And Allie is kind of serving as a research/lend assistant this year. So if you have slide decks and you want to run them past somebody, feel free to send them to any of us, but definitely Allie could use some of her lend time to meet with you, run through your slides, that kind of thing. The other thing I wanted to mention is that we didn't get a chance to pull it up on Canvas, but there's a presentation guide, and it's a 3-slide little kind of what to think about as you're preparing your slides. It kind of walks you through what we talked about today and how you can use that. But
definitely, please give us feedback. We learned last week that we were gonna give this presentation, because the person who's supposed to do it is ill. And so this is the first time we've done this one together, and please give us feedback. So. Any other questions before we take a break? All right, then we will come back at 3:05. Okay?
Thanks for doing it. Taking one for the team.
Yeah. But at least we can get these two separated.
That's so funny.
Thank
And
you.
actually, Maddie
Thank you.
and I'm gonna have you guys sign off, Kavya and Maddie, and then give me a minute and I'll set this one back up and we'll sign back on.
Okay, sounds good.
It was nice to meet you guys.
Nice to meet you.